My name is Wanda. I'm 74 years old, and I've been through a lot of things in this life. Some good. Some not so much. But there is a memory that still tightens my chest as if it had been yesterday. Tell me something. Have you ever been treated as if you were worth less just because you chose to be simple? Have you ever been looked at as if you didn't belong there? Just because of your clothes, your quiet manner, or the marks that life has left on you? The truth is that many people confuse silence with weakness. He confuses humility with ignorance. And when we arrive quietly, with worn shoes and a clean soul, they think we have no value at all. But I learned that those who have nothing to prove carries the world inside her chest, and one day the world listens. Today, I'm going to tell you what happened when I went to meet my daughter-in-law's family. Back in Texas, I was like a mother, and they looked at me as if I were a nuisance. But I left there with one certainty. It's not the clothes that a woman wears. It is the dignity that it carries. And that's how my silence turned into justice. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. It was that evening, at the elegant dinner in the Devereux house, surrounded by glasses that seemed more expensive than my entire house, that everything became clear. When my daughter-in-law's mother looked at my hands as if analyzing the state of a used object, I felt it there, in front of my own son. I was treated as if I were invisible. But not what hurt the most. What cut me inside was what came after. An offer, an envelope, money for me to take better care of myself. That gesture was not help. It was humiliation wrapped in fine education. And at that moment, I understood that certain people only discover the value of a woman when she decides to show what she never needed to say. If you've come this far and felt that this story has already touched some part of your heart, if ever in your life you've ever been diminished just for being you, give me your hand. Leave a like. Subscribe to the channel. But more than that, stay with me, because this story, before being told, needs to be felt. And I can only tell if I know and not alone. I've lived for more than 40 years in the same modest little house in a quiet corner of Tucson, Arizona. A one-bedroom house with a small balcony and a backyard that has seen a lot grow. Flowers, tomatoes, and even heartaches that I had to bury alone. My days always start the same way. I wake up to the noise of birds, prepare my coffee with stale bread, sit in the kitchen chair and watch the sun invade the old tile floor. It seems little, but it was enough for me for a long time. My neighbor, Donna Maria, a sweet Mexican who treats me like family, always comes by with some fresh tortillas and asks if I need anything from the market. Sometimes I accept it, sometimes I don't. I like to walk there, see the people, feel the wind, move the vegetables calmly. I like to be invisible in this part of the world, where no one demands anything from me. They call me Mrs. Wanda around here. In the pharmacy, in the church, in the greengrocer. Sometimes a child from the neighborhood helps me with the bags. Other times, I'm the one who helps with homework. The, the community respects me, even without knowing my entire story. But from my own family, little is heard. Now, Michael and Adele Town, my only son, when son calls once in a while. Ye, Fidelcrats, not toppled once in a while, always in a hurry, always with that overly polite tone. I try not to take it to heart. After all, he has his life, his job, his wife. You can't want your children to live in our past. But, even so, there are days when silence weighs heavily. Oh, Vincent, I'm not children. The house seems too big for me. At night, when television is the only voice that keeps me company, I ask myself if I created too much, if I gave too much. I worked as a cook in a public school for 35 years. I woke up at 5, put on my apron, made beans for 800 children, and even took lunch from home. I never missed a day. I never asked for a raise. I just wanted Michael to study, to have a different life from mine. No. And he did. How? When he called me to say he was going to marry a girl named Lindsay, I smiled. You'll like her, Mom. She's sweet, smart, nay, and I really want you to meet her family. At the time, Neil, my heart raced. I thought it was a gift, a chance to be part of his life again. No, so I was nervous. I confess. I hadn't seen Michael for almost a year. When he came, he stayed a day or two, and then ran back to the airport, always bringing some expensive gift, as if he wanted to make up for the time with objects. But this time, it looked different. He wanted me to be there, so I started to prepare. I picked up my best dress, a navy blue cotton that I sewed on my own years ago. It was still whole, with the bar I fixed with dark thread because it didn't have the same color. I washed it with care, left it to dry on the clothesline. Funny how certain clothes hold memories. Well, that dress had already gone to my friend Glory's 60th birthday, to my brother's funeral, and now I was going to meet my daughter-in-law's family. I prepared my simple suitcase, put in it a Bible, a pair of worn socks, an old hairbrush, and a box with pictures of the small Michael. I didn't know if it would show it, but I took it. Maybe they would like to meet the boy I raised with so much love. I went to the bus station. How? I took the bus to Dallas alone, with a ticket bought with the money I had saved from the previous month. I didn't want Michael to pay. I don't like to give work. The trip was long. Nearly at nighting. Tata, Sitan Sushan. I looked out the window almost all the way. I had time to remember things that I didn't even know still lived in me. When I arrived, I saw that neighborhood, Highland Park, a place that looked like something out of a magazine. Trees pruned like sculptures, cars that didn't seem to make any noise, and the house, a white mansion with windows so big that I thought I could see the future through them. But I didn't feel part of it. And it wasn't because of the size of the house, nor because of the wealth. That was the way they looked at me. At the door, Lindsay's mother reached out her cold hand. Without looking me in the eye, he called me Wanda, with a smile that didn't reach his teeth. And then, when I felt it, there's a pain that we can't explain. No. But that is old acquaintance. That's when you realize that. For certain people, you're just a tolerated presence. And it is at this moment that I need to stop for a while and ask you something. Heart to heart. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever arrived at a place where you were treated like an object that someone forgot on the table? If you've experienced this, write a sentence here in the comments that sums up this feeling. It can be I've lived it. It touched me. It's true, or even what a strength. Whatever comes out of your chest. Because this kind of pain is not only mine. And knowing that someone understands me is already an immense consolation. But going back, that night, I still didn't know what was coming. I thought it was enough to smile, to be polite, to have my heart open. But there are people who see only with their eyes, and eyes addicted to luxury will never understand the value of a woman who has spent her entire life serving with love. No, it was at this dinner that everything began to change. And I remember exactly the moment I realized that my son, it was no longer the same. Can you imagine what he did? Because it was there, between porcelain plates and forced laughter, that the first cut came, and the silence I kept at that time. It still accompanies me to this day. The first thing that caught my attention was the tone of Michael's voice. It was no longer the same. Before, he called me, calling me Mom, with that warmth that we feel in our chests, even on the phone. But lately, the voice came cold, nationally so, fast, with two long pauses, as if she had chosen her words not to say what she really wanted. Mom, when he comes to Dallas, remember to bring a light jacket. And about the dress, maybe Lindsay can lend you something more appropriate, you know. I was silent for a few seconds, and then laughed. I laughed without understanding. But, my son, it's that blue that I always wear on special days. He did not answer. He just changed the subject. Days later, Nias, he called me again. He asked me not to talk too much about religion during dinner, nor politics. They're a little bit more only essential. So sophisticated. Mom, better keep the conversation light, you know? See you here. I said yes, as I always did, because I was the mother who wanted not to get in the way, who didn't want to cause discomfort. But when I hung up, I stood staring at the phone in my hand, as if it had changed shape. It wasn't about religion, nor about politics. It was about me. It was him trying to fit me into a format that would fit better in his new world. It was at that time that I felt something for the first time. Shame. Not from him, but of me, because I thought that the love between mother and son was shielded against this kind of thing. I remembered the times when he was a boy, and we only had an old fan in the living room, and I fanned him with cardboard on hot nights. I remembered the day he fell off his bike and I ran barefoot on the hot asphalt to help. And now he called me, suggesting that I wear a borrowed dress so as not to embarrass him. I kept silent, my, and like every woman who is silent for love, I started to hear things in a different way. Every time he said, Mom, try not to exaggerate, I heard, don't be you. Every time I said, let's keep the peace, I understood, don't ruin the image I created here. And deep down, something inside me began to break, slowly, like thin dishes cracking inside. Well, yeah, that week, I prepared my trip to Dallas as someone preparing a farewell, and it wasn't just my home. It was the woman I was before I realized that the love I gave, there was no more space there. But the worst was yet to come, because what happened at dinner, everything changed. Have you ever been offered a help that was, in effect, a slap to your dignity? Because what they gave me at that table, it was not a gift. It was a disguised offense, and you will understand why. The neighborhood seemed like another reality. Highland Park, they said, Walnut Town, perfectly aligned trees, houses that looked more like museums, and a silence that wasn't peaceful. It was distant. When the interstate bus dropped me off at the bus station, I took a car by app there. The driver looked in the rearview mirror and said, I've never taken anyone with a small suitcase to this address. I smiled, and as if I didn't understand. But I understood. When I arrived at the Devereaux house, I was greeted by Lindsay with a quick hug, and by Michael with a kiss on the forehead somewhat distractedly. At the door was her mother, Charlene, a pearl necklace around my neck, a strong perfume that gave me a headache, and a smile that didn't touch my eyes. He stretched out his hand dryly and said only, Hannah, Mrs. Wanda, Silas. I entered feeling that it was a visit of favor. The house was so big that my voice echoed, all white and polished, shining. Each object reminded me that I didn't belong there. I was taken to one of the guest rooms. The decor was beautiful but cold. The pillows smelled like expensive cleaners, and the bed looked like it hadn't received anyone for years. I sat down for a while, took a deep breath, and was called to dinner. The table looked like a movie set. Plates with golden details, napkins folded like flowers, crystal glasses so thin that they seemed fragile as the patience of the owners of the house. I stood until they told me where to sit. They put me at the end, away from the center of the conversation. Charlene sat at the bedside. Of course, Michael and Lindsay side by side, smiling without showing their teeth. Her father, a quiet gentleman, now read the printed menu with the names of the dishes in French. I just wanted to eat and talk for a while. When the dish arrived, I thanked him with a sincere smile. Wow, what a good smell. It looks like food made with care. No one answered. Nia, Martin Darnell. Michael lowered his eyes. Lindsay smiled from the side. Oh, as if to excuse someone for existing. During the meal, Charlene asked me where I was from. Tucson, Arizona. Wow. She arched an eyebrow. No. And do you work with? Oh, im retired one. Honestly, adulted years. I worked 35 years in a public school as a cook. Her fork stopped in mid-air. Ah, public school. And near outer still. The husband wiped his mouth slowly with his napkin and looked away. The conversation continued. Ma, but without me. They talked about trips to Europe, golf clubs, a charity dinner in Napa Valley. When I tried to comment that I like to plant my own tomatoes, the subject died on the table until they brought wine. A waiter in white gloves served everyone with a bottle covered in a linen cloth, glasses being filled with a dark, shiny liquid. And at a bar. When it was my turn, he hesitated. No, relax, and how? He looked at Charlene. She just nodded and said, Water for Mrs. Wanda. Wine doesn't go with everything. And he smiled. I smiled, too, but inside, something hardened. My hand squeezed the glass of water tightly, as if holding myself. I didn't ask for an explanation. I didn't ask for respect. But every gesture at that table said, without saying, you're not one of us. And maybe it was true. But there, what I cause, us, Kaktejuka. At that moment, I discovered that being invisible to the right eyes, it can be a blessing in disguise, because what they didn't know is that I was there with a humble body, but with a whole soul, and the moment was yet to come when the silence of the silent woman would scream louder than any muffled laughter. But before that, niece, a phrase said behind his back, it would tear me inside. Do you want to know what I heard in that house? Prepare your heart, because what they said, it wasn't just cruel, it was revealing. After dinner, after dinner, I excused myself and went to the bathroom. I needed to breathe. The food, no matter how well done, seemed bitter in my mouth. My calm. I looked at myself in the mirror of that impeccable house, and for a second, I almost didn't recognize myself. It wasn't the reflection that hurt. It was what I was feeling inside. The kind of pain that has no name, but that tightens the chest as if someone had torn a piece of your history. I stayed there for a few minutes, trying to put everything in place, and when I walked back down the hallway, I heard voices in the next room. He wasn't peeking. I was just going back to my room. But the words came like a slap. She looks good, but clearly she came from a reality. Simpler, I hope Michael knows what he's doing. The voice was Charlene's. I stopped. My feet froze on the shag carpet. Yes, Mom, but he was always too generous. He has this attachment to the past, to his childhood. Not down. Maybe this will pass. It was Lindsay. Oh, and then the silence. No defense, not a word from my son. When I entered the room, when I entered the room, everyone changed the subject in the blink of an eye. Wow. Plastic smiles, forced conversation. I pretended I didn't hear. I sat on the couch with my hands clasped in my lap, as if waiting for time to pass faster. And inside, my heart bled slowly. Michael led me into the room and, in a half-tired, half-guilty tone, said, "Anna, Mom tries to understand. They are like that. They are formal. It's not personal. It's not personal." Well, the phrase kept echoing in my head, as if contempt dressed in elegance could be excused by etiquette, as if humiliating myself with smiles and sweet words was less cruel than screaming. And in that instant, I understood. My son didn't just accept that. He was part of it. I smiled at him, a small, a yearly, bitter smile that he didn't even notice, because there are people who only see what they want to see. I stayed in the room, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, with my eyes burning. I wondered where I went wrong. I wondered if too much love spoils. To protect yourself, lâche c'est une charme, and not c'est so. To feed, to dress, to study, to give everything. It becomes excess, but at some point our hearts get tired of asking, and he starts to keep it. Look, I'm here, opening my heart, telling my story. If you're listening, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, because I still have a lot of things saved to tell you. This isn't just about me. It's about all the moms who have been silenced with fake smiles and abandoned in the middle of the party. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay motionless, with my eyes open in the dark, listening to the noise of a house that was not mine. The muffled laughter coming from the hallway, the bowls being washed in the distant kitchen, the presence of my son so close and so far. The light of dawn entered through the crack in the curtain and illuminated the wall as a truth. I was no longer needed. But what I didn't know is that in the morning, something even more cruel awaited me. Well, it was not a harsh word. It wasn't a fight. It was a gesture. A gift. An envelope. And when I opened that, Neon, I knew. My dignity had been put up for sale. Can you imagine what it was? Because that there was the fuse. That night, I didn't close my eyes. I lay in bed too-maked, with the smell of home that has never seen children running through the corridors, looking at the white ceiling as if looking at the emptiness of the soul. And in that hard silence, the memories began to visit me. One by one, one by one, as if they wanted to remind me of who I am. I found myself with my hands dirty with flour, spending the night baking orange cakes with crystallized sugar coating, all to pay for the school band uniform. Because Michael wanted to play the saxophone and I wanted to see him shine. I remembered the day I sold my wedding ring, kept with so much care, to buy that fashionable sneaker he wanted so much. 3 installments that hurt more than the entire amount. But he smiled, and that smile was enough payment. I remembered the night he was approved in college. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried softly, kneeling on the floor, and thanking God for having made it. I don't even know how I paid for the first semester. Resale wealth. I think God covered what I lacked. And there, lying on that cold mattress, with my belly still full of food that didn't go down properly. I felt each of these memories like a sharp knife, because now the same boy I bandaged my knee when he fell off his bike, the same boy who slept cuddling with me on cold nights, seemed to have erased everything. Or worse, he seemed to be ashamed. How? Shame on the woman who spent nights sewing Halloween costumes with scraps donated by her neighbor. Shame on the mother who made a point of going to every school meeting, even after leaving a heavy shift in the kitchen. And I asked myself in silence, what had himself, what the odd, or student churches about it. Where did he get lost? Was it me who made a mistake, raising a child to be big, without teaching him to remain small where it really matters? That night turned into a slow torture, and as the hours passed, the white ceiling seemed to tighten my chest more and more. It wasn't just sadness, it was something different, an old thing, but one that had been dormant inside me. A firmness, a quiet force, not of those who want to take revenge, but of those who are tired of accepting. It was as if the memories, all of them, told me, wow, you're not this ground cloth they're trying to make you feel. You are made of struggle, of faith, of truth. And that's when I decided. I didn't say anything at that time, but inside, something has changed. A key, one certainty, one certain betrayal. Because that morning, when Charlene put that envelope in my hands, wow, smiling with that air of superiority, I was no longer the same. And what was inside him? Well, that was the final push. Do you know when someone tries to buy you with feigned kindness? That's that. Want to know what was in that envelope? Because what they offered me there, it was the greatest humiliation of my life. The next day, the smell of coffee came from the kitchen as soon as I opened the bedroom door. My bones still ached from the hard mattress and the sleepless night. I went to the living room, hid away shell, trying to put on my best smile, as if wanting to keep the peace even after the war. Charlene was sitting at the table with a fine porcelain cup between her fingers, as if holding a trophy. Michael was playing with his cell phone. Lindsay cut fruit into pieces so small that they seemed to be for display, not to eat. Good morning, Wanda, Charlene said in that sweet tone that doesn't heat up. Did you sleep well? More or less, I replied. Now, but the day dawned beautiful. She nodded. So, as if she had expected this answer, and then pulled a white envelope from her bag. Before I forget, we wanted to give you that. Consider it as a gift. Maybe it will help with some new clothes, or something for your hair. A small treat. I stared at the envelope for a few seconds. My fingers were slow to move. I picked it up carefully, as if holding something that could burn. I opened slowly. Inside, $300 bills. 3 fell, as if my dignity could be paid for with change. I looked her in the eyes. Smile. One emerged and seemed not of joy, but of understanding. A small smile. I'd chosen with the mouth, but not with the eyes. Michael pretended to be distracted. Lindsay adjusted the sleeve of her blouse without raising her head. I folded the envelope gently. put it in my bag, and thanked it with a thank you that came dry but firm. They think I'm a burden. They think I have a price. At that moment, inside my chest, something began to rise. It wasn't anger. It was certainty. I wasn't going to shout or argue or return the money in front of them to make a scandal. No, I'm not a theater woman. No, I am a woman of time. And when a woman like me decides to shut up, the world changes around it, because it is in silence that justice begins to take shape. No, sometimes we spend so much time accepting little that we forget how much it is worth. But when contempt comes disguised as kindness, that's when the soul wakes up. And if you're still here with me, how? Listening to this story, I want to ask you something from the bottom of my heart. Stay until the end, because the most memorable moment is yet to come. And when it arrives, you will understand why certain wounds only heal when we choose ourselves. After that coffee, I went to the back garden. Oh, I tried it here. I sat on the stone bench and stared at the sky. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just let time pass. Michael came to me later. Said he needed to go out with Lindsay to sort out some things about the wedding. He asked if I wanted to go along. I said I preferred to stay. He nodded with relief, and in that gesture, I knew. Oh, he felt ashamed of me. My one, art thou? The boy I carried on my lap now avoided being seen next to me. But he didn't know that as he walked out the door, I was stepping into myself again. No, and there, how, in that garden, William, alone, Hugh, I began to plan my response, an answer that would not come in words. Can you imagine what a silent woman can do when she has already lost the fear of losing? Because it was on that day that everything began to change, and no one saw it. That afternoon, I sat at the desk in my room and took a white paper. I don't touch the side. Also, went out from those that were there in the drawer. I found a pen with blue ink and started writing. The words came out slowly but steadily. It was as if my hand, from so much cooking, washing, welcoming, and blessing, was now finally saying everything that my mouth had always spared. I wrote with my round handwriting, the one I learned as a girl, when I dreamed of being a teacher, before life pushed me to the school kitchen. Dear Michael, Whitehall, I began. Lord, I have loved you from the first day I felt you inside me. You were born in a difficult time, but you never lacked love. The house was small, but my chest was big. I gave you the best I could, even when it was almost nothing. And every sacrifice I made with joy. And I'll not do, because you were my hope for the future. Just wanted to let you know that. I continued for 4 pages. I spoke of sleepless nights, of the pride of seeing him with a diploma in hand, of the laughter that only mother and son share. But I also talked about pain, from the pain of being looked at as a nuisance, from the pain of seeing my silence interpreted as weakness. I spoke of what money will never buy: respect, gratitude, memory. I folded the letter carefully I held it for a while, between my fingers, looking at her. Oh, for a moment, I thought about leaving her on the bed. I open, and down, fainted the next, a sat, until the night. But something inside me said no. I went to the bathroom. I turned on the light, opened the lid of the toilet, and, in silence, burned the letter right there. The flames consumed every word I wrote with love and sorrow. The paper turned to ash too quickly, and I didn't cry because there is pain that is already dry. At dinner, unknown, they called me with a wanda. Michelle, intention resell, and stands to ask. Are you served? And I said I wasn't very hungry. I took just a small piece of salmon, which I pushed with water. No, I didn't sound. She said she was tired, that she was going to retire early. No one insisted. Back in the room, I sat up on the bed and opened my old leather wallet, the same one that accompanied me for so many years, hidden at the bottom of the suitcase. Inside, wide, between worn-out papers and a lottery ticket from 1997. Was it? Madame, I can see your way. How many party ordered one time? My Centurion card. None denied. Black card. No limits. I never used it. I never showed it, because I never had to prove anything to anyone. I wasn't poor. I was silent. And at that moment, why, alone, and with the light of the lamp illuminating my wrinkled hands, I truly understood. Those who have nothing to hide, new as own, are also in no hurry to explain themselves. No, sometimes the world treats us as invisible, but invisible is not the same as impotent. There are people who think that because we don't react, we don't feel it, that because we don't scream, we consent, but they are wrong. And I'm here telling you this because I know there are other women like me who have swallowed hard many times. So, tell me something. Have you ever felt like saying everything and ended up keeping quiet out of love? Fear? How? Dignity? Imbalance? Say, I'm not a stack or not a guy. If so, comment below with just a I know how it is, or I understand you, because we can even shut up. But she is not alone. And that night, with that black card shining in the palm of my hand, I started to think. I thought out what was coming, what I could do, not to hurt, but to show. And the curious thing is that I didn't have to do much, because the universe, he has his own way of adjusting things. Want to know what happened next? Because, without planning, I ended up becoming the center of a dinner that no one would forget. I woke up before the sun. It was still dark outside, but inside me was a different light. I got up slowly, folded the clothes I had worn, rushed down, packed the small suitcase as if closing a cycle. I didn't leave anything out of place. Before leaving the room, I looked out the window once more. Once, the Devereux mansion still slept, surrounded by luxury and silence. But inside, in the heart of that house, too big, I had discovered everything I needed to know. I went to the kitchen. No ice. Charlene was there. In a silk dressing gown. No. Stirring her tea as if the world revolved around that cup. Good morning. Mrs. Devereux. Nay, Asilisa. Now, Cantonam Taam. I wanted to let you know that I am leaving early. She looked up in surprise, but didn't make an effort to hide her relief. Oh, sure. Are you going? Is everything okay? Yes, it is. I just miss my home. My garden. I need to take care of my little things. She nodded and said only, Why, I wish you a good trip. Michael came down the stairs minutes later, his face crumpled from sleep and his cell phone already in his hand. I said I was leaving. He seemed to hesitate. No, but soon replied, Nettie quiet. If that's what you want, Mom, well, that's okay. He gave me a quick hug. No, without firmness. Lindsay didn't even show up. Wow. I grabbed my suitcase, took my slow steps along the impeccable sidewalk, and got into the Uber that was waiting for me. The driver was young, polite, put my suitcase in the trunk without saying a word. When I settled in the back seat and closed the door, I took a deep breath, not of relief, but of rebirth. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I owned myself. I took the cell phone from my bag. My fingers were shaking a little, but I wasn't nervous. It was power. No, you won't turn. I looked up the number of Mr. Raymond, well, my attorney in Phoenix, a discreet man who has been taking care of my affairs for more than 20 years. The call answered on the third ring. Good morning. Wanda, is everything okay? Now it is. I need us to make a change in my will. Today? Now. If possible, another day. He was silent for a moment, then replied, Not said gone here. On to. Of course. As you wish. Do you want to stop by the office? No. No. Send me everything by email? Oh. I sign with the digital certificate. But I want one thing to be clear. Michael's share will be donated, with first and last name. It goes to an educational fund, now, one that benefits the children of public school cooks. Do you understand? On the other end of the line, a brief silence, and then, I get it, Wanda. Blah. And it will appear exactly like that. Turned off. There. Out in that moving car. While the city passed by the window, I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt a kind of peace that isn't noisy. The peace of those who no longer need to ask for a place in anyone's life. Because when we are forgotten, we suffer. But when we choose to withdraw, the story changes. And that's what I did, Mom. I returned to my home in Tucson with my whole heart. My tomatoes were waiting for me. The rocking chair was in the same place. The neighbor, Donna Maria, appeared in the late afternoon with tortillas and said, We miss you. And I replied, I also felt missing where I went. No, there are people who think that money measures the value of a person. But I have learned with my entire life that the silence of a dignified woman weighs more than any inheritance. And if you think my decision was tough, just wait until you find out what Michael did when he got the news. Do you think he accepted? Do you think he regretted it? Because what came next, it was even more revealing. Returning to my little house in Tucson was like breathing again after a long time underwater. The wooden door creaked the same way when I pushed it with my hip, and the smell of my dried lavender in the corner of the bookshelf was still there. I took off my shoes in the entryway, as I always did, and walked to the kitchen. I made my black coffee, new, strong as I like, without sugar, and you, and sat in the window chair with the hot mug in my hands. From there, I could see the garden. My tomatoes were a little bigger, undone. The earth is still damp from when neighbor Maria came to water, and it was looking at that little corner of the world that I knew with certainty. Well, I had done the right thing. The next morning, I went to the bank. I wore the blue floral dress, the one I kept only for the occasions when I want to remember who I am. I entered with my head held high. So what is up? I updated everything. Accounts, beneficiaries, automatic transfers. I left there as someone stamping a new stage of life. Then I went to Mr. Clayton Hirsch's office, an old lawyer like me, of whom I have been a client for more than 30 years. When I entered, he received me with that same calm smile, already used to my calm but firm posture. Nurse, Wanda, he said, I imagine the previous will no longer fits. It doesn't fit. No, Clayton, now, let's write a new one. I share the locale, how can't you make chasin? But this time, no, not here at Capelan, and the cottage portal, with details. And so we did. Oh, Michael would cease to be my universal heir. In his place, I included 3 children from the public school where I worked for so many years. Smart girls who sell candy at the school door to help at home. I put their full names and asked for an educational fund to be created to guarantee their studies until college. I also allocated part of the inheritance to Maria, my neighbor, Pam, the woman who knocked on my door with tortillas and worry, who listened to me without haste and without judgment. That he never asked me for anything, but always offered me everything. I signed the New Testament with a firm hand, and when I did, I felt a relief that has no word. It was like taking off a heavy coat that I had worn out of obligation for years. On the way back home, I stopped at the market, bought yellow flowers and a sweet bread that I only eat on special days, because that day deserved it. And it was there, in my small kitchen, with the radio playing an old song and the smell of coffee invading the room, that I realized one thing. The world doesn't need to know what you do in silence, but fate always listens. If this of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes, all a story needs to continue is someone willing to listen to it with an open heart. That night, I slept early. Sleep came easy, clean, sound, as it hadn't come for a long time. And I thought to myself, what an irony. I spent a lifetime thinking I needed to be accepted, when in fact, I just needed to accept myself. But no, as you can imagine, life doesn't leave us alone for long. Because days later, the phone rang. It was him, Michael 99, and his voice when he called me mother. Oh, she was no longer the same. Want to know what he said? Because what came out of his mouth that day, it was like a broken mirror. The phone rang on a gray Wednesday, one of those when the sky seems to hold back the tears all day. I was watering the plants when I heard the muffled ringing coming from inside. I left the watering can leaning against the step and went to answer. On the screen, his name, Leodozi, Michael, Mich, I took a deep breath before sliding my finger. Mom. His voice was different now, tense, new. I'm going to see you, low, cat, almost trembling, as if I were stepping on thin ice. I received a letter from the lawyer, a notification. Yes, is it true? Did you remove me from the will? I went to the chair on the balcony and sat down slowly, looking at the heavy sky. No, it's true. Silence on the other side. Oyo di chow no chow, a limdashashio, but not the usual silence. It was a trembling silence. But why? What happened? Mom? Why would you do that? I didn't answer for a while. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he needed to feel the weight of the silence I carried for so long. You know what you did? Well, Michael, Nisho, Angeri, Outsteri Silkow, and he knows, above all, what he didn't do. Mom, look, you got it all wrong. That night was strange for everyone. They are difficult. I just tried to avoid conflict. I closed my eyes. The chair swayed slightly in the wind. Avoiding conflict is costly when the price is the dignity of the mother herself. He kept quiet, and in that silence, I felt it non-charm for the first time. He didn't care about money. Oh, he cared about what he was missing. Because there is a time in life when we realize that what was guaranteed is no longer guaranteed. You treated me like a visitor in a place where I planted everything. He looked at me as a nuisance. And he didn't say a word when they diminished me with smiles. You, Michael, Mich. He didn't even defend me with his eyes. Mother, no, you don't need to say anything else. I listened to him breathe on the other side. You're still my son, but am also a person, and there, on the other end of the line, I heard something I had never heard from Michael. The hesitation of regret, but belated regret tastes like cold food. And I, little Marstig, after all, had already eaten with a lot of dignity. Look, if you've been following this story so far, no, I'll tell you from the heart. It's not about money. It never was. Man, it's about love that you don't recognize. It is about silence that weighs more than screaming. And, believe me, what comes after this here is the moment that I myself never thought I would live. I humbly hung up the phone. I kept it in my bag, and I went back to the garden. But that day, something in the air was already warning me. Life was going to surprise me once again. And the surprise came, not with words, but with an unexpected invitation. Why, Alma, do you dare to guess what it was? Because it was there that the story turned for good. When they called me saying they wanted to come visit me in Tucson, I felt a weight in my chest that I didn't know if it was hope or just the tiredness of those who have waited too long. We want to reconnect, they said. Now, reconnect. A beautiful word, but it only works when there is truth on both sides. Charlene didn't come. Of course, that said a lot, but Michael and Lindsay arrived on a hot afternoon, the wind kicking up dust from the street and the sun beating right down on my garden. I received them on the balcony, where I always receive those who really love me. I prepared a simple dinner. Wow. Boiled corn, slowly seasoned beans, homemade bread that I baked myself that morning, the wooden table, the hound. Where scarred by years of use, seemed more welcoming than any French porcelain. They sat down, I know, uncomfortable as someone who steps on a ground he does not know. I served each one calmly, without exaggeration, no, without forced emotion. It is curious how, when the heart matures, we learn to offer the minimum as if it were the maximum, not out of coldness, but out of protection. The conversation started timidly. Michael asking about the garden, the weather, the doctor. Lindsay complimenting the smell of the bread. Wow. But without touching on the subject that she knew was there. At the table, waiting to be served, I watched the two of them. You count. I noticed the two of them, noticing the way they avoided looking at each other, as if waiting for the right moment to say what they came to say. But I already knew, and the truth is, before they even arrived, I had prepared something more than dinner, and when I finished putting the corn on the plates, I went to the old cabinet, opened the top drawer, and took a brown envelope. I came back slowly, pulled out my chair, and sat down before them. I placed the envelope in the center of the table, unhurriedly, and pushed it towards Michael. It's for you. He frowned and opened it. Ah, no. Her eyes ran across the pages, and her face gradually changed. First the confusion, then the fright. Lindsay leaned in to look. When she saw the names of the beneficiaries, the 3 children from the public school and her neighbor Maria, the color disappeared from her face. The silence that fell there. It was a heavy silence, which seemed to occupy every corner of the balcony. Michael tried to laugh. Oh, that nervous laugh of someone who realizes that he lost more than money. Mom, is this a joke? Did you really do that? I just stared at him. His eyes ran across the page, looking for perhaps some hidden clause, some explanation, some reason to believe that it wasn't real. Lindsay squeezed his arm. Michael, that, me. And that's when I said, low, calm, without raising his voice at any time. You measured me by my clothes. For my small suitcase in a simple way. But they didn't know the value of the woman who wore that fabric. He swallowed. Lindsay looked away. I continued. It's more than that. They didn't know the value of a mother's silence. I paused, not to dramatize, but because the memory came strong, like a sudden wind. No, Andy, there are memories that are kept inside us like photographs that never fade. And when they come back in one piece. Well, aching and illuminating at the same time. If you are listening to me, have already had a memory that touched you like this, share it in the comments. It says, I felt it. I know how it is. I remember. Sometimes sharing memory is the only way for it to fit inside us. Michael ran his hands over his face. Mom, Monsieur Captain, I didn't imagine. I interrupted him with a small gesture. No, he didn't imagine it because he didn't want to see it. Lindsay took a deep breath, frustrated, maybe with him, maybe with me, maybe with herself. The food was cold on the table, but nothing there was hungry, nothing but the truth. I got up slowly. No. Picked up my plate, took it to the sink, and let the water run unhurriedly. Behind me, silence. And when I turned around, Michael was still holding the envelope as if it were a broken mirror showing everything he tried not to see. Night fell slowly, bringing the smell of wet earth. And I, leaning against the sink, looking at the two of them, felt a serenity that I had never felt before. Because on that simple balcony, on that table marked by time, I was finally on the right side of history, on the side of myself. But what happened after that revelation? That was something that even I didn't see coming. Because what came out of Lindsay's mouth, well, seconds later, changed everything again. Want to know what she said? Because it was there, in that last breath of courage, that her mask fell. Michael was the first to react, holding the envelope as if holding an object that was too hot. He tried to compose his face, drew the air deep, and said, Well, Mom, you're hurt. I didn't need that. If you had talked to me before, how? His voice trembled, but it was tempered with that tone of justification that, for years, I accepted without realizing it. I watched him slowly, calmly, when I so down, as someone who finally sees the adult behind the boy and understands that some absences have no excuse. Before I opened my mouth, Lindsay leaned over the table and blurted out the phrase she'd been holding since the moment she saw the papers. Did you pretend to be poor? The question came dry, cutting, thus, without a filter. It was more accusation than surprise. My eyes met hers. I saw fear. I saw wounded pride. No, I also saw the shame that she still tried to disguise. And for a moment, I was silent. Not because I had no answer, no, but because I realized that, for the first time, they wanted to know who I really was. Then I smiled, a small, no, serene smile. How? One of those that come from a place much older than sorrow. I didn't fake anything. Lindsay, I just didn't show off. She blinked, confused, and I continued. Noun, you can't. Abony out there sudden attractio. True poverty is not that of the pocket. It is that of the spirit. The silence after that fell heavy, almost palpable. It was the kind of silence that dismantles, that breaks structures, that reveals more than 1,000 words. Michael lowered his head. And yet Lindsay leaned back in her chair, as if someone had taken the air out of her. I went back to eating my corn, slowly, and yourselves are calm now. When 90 so, as if you know you don't need to run to explain anything. The spoon hitting the plate lightly sounded like the only living sound on that porch. I chewed calmly as their world collapsed without a bang. Michael stirred the food, but couldn't swallow it. He left the plate halfway. Lindsay ran her hand through her hair, restless, looking now at me, now at the envelope. It was as if she finally understood the value of things that don't shine, and realized that she never had it inside her. I think we'd better go, she said in an agonized whisper. Michael nodded without arguing. He looked smaller. Then, what? Shrunken, Naida, as if the truth had torn from him something that he thought was definitive. They rose slowly, as guilty of a crime that they did not recognize at the time, but that was now beginning to weigh on them. Good night, Mom, Michael murmured. Mom. Good night, I replied. Neodion, Town, without bitterness. I didn't accompany the two to the car. I sat on the balcony, listening to the sound of footsteps without knowing if they were of regret or wounded pride. The car door slammed. Oh, the engine started. And they drove slowly down the narrow street. From where I was, I could see the sky changing color. The blue of the late afternoon turned into a deep purple, and soon the purple would turn to darkness. But there, no, as night came with the smell of wet earth and warm wind, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. It was not revenge. It was not victory. It was just the feeling of having found myself again after losing myself in silence for years. It was the weight finally leaving the chest, giving room for breathing to be whole again. And as I looked at the darkening sky, I thought, certain truths can only be said at the right time, and this one had finally been. But the curious thing is that the universe doesn't like to end stories when we think it's over. Because that same night, before I went to sleep, an unexpected message lit up my cell phone screen, and what was written there, it changed everything again. Can you imagine who it was? Because this time, it wasn't Michael. That night, when the phone lit up, I thought it was Michael, trying to continue the conversation that had been stuck in his throat. But it wasn't. The name that appeared on the screen surprised me. It was a distant cousin of Lindsay's, a girl with whom I had barely exchanged 2 words at dinner in Dallas. The message was short, almost urgent. Wanda, you have no idea what's going on here. I read that twice, trying to understand. Before I could answer, another message arrived. The truth has spread. And then she explained, word for word, as if she were venting something she had held on to for years. The day after dinner at my house, Lindsay and Michael had tried to hide the subject of the will, but someone overheard part of the conversation in the hallway of the condominium where they lived. And in Dallas, where luxury goes hand in hand with gossip, it only took one loose sentence to turn into a storm. Charlene, too proud to keep silent, eventually remarked to a close friend, Michael's poor mom was never poor at all. Heiress, oh, an old fund left by her husband, and we treating her as, well, how we treated. The friend took the story further, down, and within hours the whole town seemed to know the poor mother was, indeed, in fact, a discreet woman with a fortune saved and dignity to spare. The Devereux family, they were painted as self-serving, arrogant, nice, and, worst of all, ignorant of their own behavior. Lindsay, marrying a wild child, her cousin told me, had been practically pressured to explain the situation in a social circle. Well, he couldn't, stammered. Nay, I'm so bomb. He lost his ground. A cousin of hers, influential in local society, has completely distanced hers. An important invitation to a charity event was withdrawn, as he did not think it appropriate to mix names involved in family scandal. Scandal. That was the word used. I belong. I am Samishari, Katasa Siu, here in Tucson. Reading all that on the screen of a simple cell phone. Sitting in my rocking chair, almost didn't know what to feel. It was not joy. It was not tasty revenge. It was just justice following its path, like water that finds its way out, even when they try to block. While all of this spread across Dallas, I was in my backyard. Well, did you go? I was in my backyard, kneeling in the dirt, squeezing the roots of my plants with affection. The sun was hot on my back, and I kept remembering how many years I had lived in silence, accepting things the way they came. Now, the whole world seemed to hear a noise that had always been there, the noise of their pride. Later, when out turned, kid they ceased up chop, be here. The same cousin wrote to me, Lindsay is very shaken. No, I've never seen her like this. And, she knows you haven't said anything to anyone. That's what hurts the most. I closed the phone slowly. Because, no, deep down, that was the truest part. I didn't have to open my mouth. The world did the rest. In the late afternoon, while I was watering my tomatoes, I thought, it's curious when we try to humiliate someone simple. God has a beautiful way of turning the tables, and it turns slowly, now, in the way that teaches the most. But, not despite all this, there was someone who did not accept to remain silent, someone who decided to talk to me personally. Wow, in a gesture I never expected. And this visit, it moved me in a way you can't even imagine. Do you know who knocked on my door that week? Because when I heard the footsteps in my backyard, I swear, my heart even stopped. I was in the backyard, kneeling by my tomatoes. What? When I heard footsteps approaching through the side gate, it wasn't Donna Maria, nor the postman. Those steps had weight, hesitation, and guilt. When I got up, wiping my hands on the hem of my dress, I saw Michael standing there, holding an old book that I recognized at the time. It was one of those that was on the living room shelf, full of my markings, pages yellowed by time. He looked smaller than I remembered, with his shoulders drooping and his eyes red, as if he had been carrying a pain he no longer knew how to hide. Mom, can I come in? I gave space without saying anything. He took a deep breath, holding the book as if holding a truth that he finally decided to face. I found something of yours. We sat on the porch, he next to me, not touching me. Slowly, he opened the book on the page where an old envelope served as a marker, and when he pulled out that folded paper, my heart jumped from memory. It was a letter. A letter from me. A letter I wrote many years before, at a time when life was harder. I say, and I was afraid to leave without leaving words for my boy to understand who I was. I'd forgotten about her, but she hadn't forgotten me. Michael opened the letter carefully, as if it were a piece of his own chest. The shaky handwriting, round, no, but firm as always. If one day I am no longer here, I wrote, I want you to know everything I have done has been for you. Even what I didn't have, I had for you. And if one day you doubt my love, come back to this letter. She's what's left of me when I didn't have the strength to say it out loud. He cried before finishing the first line. He cried like that boy who broke his arm and ran to my lap. He cried like the young man who went to college and thought that the world would make him forget where he came from. He cried like the man who finally realized what he lost, without realizing that he was leaving on the way. I stared at the horizon while he cried, not out of coldness, but because sometimes to look into the eyes of repentance is to see too much. Mom, why didn't you ever give me that? He asked. Nice. His voice broken. I shrugged, softly, almost smiling, because you wouldn't understand back then. He swallowed his tears with difficulty. And now, Leo, now, do you understand? Now, I understand everything. He tried to hug me, but stopped halfway. Perhaps he thought he no longer had that right. Maybe he expected me to pull my hand back, but I let him hug me. Anyway, because a mother's love doesn't disappear. He only learns to breathe without suffocating. We stood there for a few minutes, the warm wind passing between the two of us, as if carrying away everything that had never been said. When he walked away, he wiped away his tears with the back of his hand and tried to compose himself. I called you several times today. Mom, I know. Why didn't you answer? I took a deep breath and told the simplest, harshest truth that ever came out of my mouth. Because I was picking tomatoes at the market now, and because now I choose to whom I answer. He closed his eyes slowly, understanding everything that sentence carried. It was not revenge. It was not punishment. It was just freedom. My, how, finally mine. He held my hand. No, wow, carefully, as if fearing that it would escape. And I did. Not as before. Not as always, but as someone who offers a human gesture, not an obligation. Mom, Mio, I didn't know that you kept all this. I didn't even know you had forgotten. He opened his mouth to say something, but found no words. And sometimes silence explains more. We stayed like this for a while, listening to the sound of the birds that came to drink water in the clay pot that I leave in the corner of the yard. I wanted to fix that, he said. Oh, I wanted to do it differently. I looked at him with tenderness, but also with truth. Michael, now, some things are fixed, other, we only learn from them for a moment. I see you. I saw in his eyes the boy he was, the one who ran with his knees scraped and his big smile, unashamed of the love he received. And it's curious how certain memories are so strong that they seem to come back alive, as if we could touch them. No, there are memories that mark us forever. Some hurt, others heal. If you're listening to me, you also have a memory that never left your chest, good or bad. Share in the comments. It says, I remember. I felt it. Sometimes remembering together is lighter than remembering alone. As night began to fall, Michael stood up slowly. Can I come back another day? I smiled, but gave no direct answer, neither yes nor no. He understood. He left with slow steps, carrying the book, the letter, and a piece of his own conscience that finally woke up. And I stood there on the porch, watching the sky change color, feeling that something was striking. But not completely, because repentance is just the beginning of a bigger hit, and disarrangement. It was very close to happening. Can you imagine who looked for me after him? Because the next visit, this one left me breathless. The following Saturday, then calm. I woke up before the sun with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. I opened the wardrobe and saw my dresses hanging there, one next to the other, one all so familiar that they seemed to be an extension of my skin. But that day, my eyes stopped on one I almost never wore, a new, simple dress in a soft blue, light fabric that fell beautifully on the body. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't flashy. It was just my Taukia. And for the first time in a long time, I wanted to dress for myself, not to please, not to hide. I tied my hair with a beautiful bobby pin, one of those I bought many years ago and never had the courage to use, because I always thought it was not necessary. It was never necessary, but deserved. Oh, Hayonis, that was. I walked to the church. The morning wind hit my face, and I felt like something inside me was coming back into place. Inside, new people were already arriving, each with their stories, their pains, their secrets, as always happens in these silent encounters of the soul. When I entered, me, About 3 people looked at me and smiled in that way that cannot be explained, but felt. Mrs. Parker, who has always sat on the same bench for over 40 years, put her hand on my arm and said, "Well, I sit him out on my chat. Wanda, you look different. It feels lighter." I smiled. And no, I reincarnate. Not one of those wide smiles, but a small, pandio, pandestai, sidistum part deep smile that comes from within. Wow. And I just replied, "No, I'm living." Well, Tata, Parker, nay, Patoa. I think I'm finally living. I sat in my usual seat, but everything seemed new. The light that came in through the colored window fell straight on my feet, as if life was trying to illuminate me slowly. Wow. Or not since trying to height and unhurriedly. The priest began to speak, but I confess that my mind fluctuated a little. Oh, I watched every person inside, every gesture, every breath, and I realized that for the first time in so many years, I wasn't carrying the world on my back. I was alone, existing. After Mass, I stopped by the market and bought fresh fruit, sweet bread, 1 pound, and yellow flowers. The cashier girl, none, a young woman named Emily, oh, who studies at night and works during the day, told me that she was thinking about dropping out of college because she couldn't afford the next semester. I listened attentively. My heart tightened. She didn't ask me for anything. She just vented. But sometimes God puts a request in the mouth of someone who doesn't even know he is asking. That same day, when I returned home, I made an anonymous transfer to her college fund. Why did your name circle? Enough to cover the entire semester. Then I went to Maria's house. Her old car had been making a strange noise for months, and she said that a little more will do. I heard that so many times, and so many times she held my hand when I had no strength, that this time I wanted to be the one to extend hers. I paid for the entire repair. I didn't tell her anything. I just left the folded receipt on her kitchen table, under a vase of flowers. You know, I think there's a moment in life when we understand that we don't need permission from the world to be good, to be strong, to be whole. And I was there, sitting on the porch, with the sun beating down on my feet, realizing that old age, he hadn't arrested me. I had freed myself. And perhaps this is one of the most beautiful things in life. When you choose yourself, the world has no other option but to respect you. And if you've been here with me so far, I ask you to continue. Because from the bottom of my heart, I feel that the most remarkable moment in this story is yet to happen. Sometimes, after so much pain, life prepares a revelation that we never imagined. And this revelation came on a silent afternoon, when someone I had never expected appeared at my gate. Do you dare say who it was? Because what happened that day, it changed everything again. He appeared without making a sound. No, as if afraid of being seen. It was a hot afternoon in Tucson. The air still, the light beating pie in the backyard. I was sitting on the porch, peeling oranges, when I heard the gate creaking slowly. I raised my head, thinking it was Maria bringing fresh tortillas. But it wasn't. It was Michael. It was Michael, my son, alone. Ow. No Lindsay. Now. No bags. No hurried air that I always carried when she came to visit me. He took 2 steps into the yard and stopped, as if he had forgotten how to enter his mother's house. And that's when I noticed he's different. His shirt rumpled, his face haggard, his eyes tired. No, not tired of work, tired of pride. When he opened his mouth, his voice came out low, almost broken. Why no Dio, Tom, Mom, Mom, can I talk to you? I gestured with my hand for him to sit in the chair next to me. He said nothing. I didn't smile. But I didn't close my face either. I was in a place in my life where nothing else took me by force, neither joy nor sadness. He sat slowly, as if that chair weighed more than his body. After a long silence, Michael ran both hands over his face, took a deep breath, and said, I've come to apologize. I didn't answer. He continued, myself, his voice choking. I was a coward. I was weak, and I let you go through things I never should have left. The wind blew lightly, stirring the leaves of the lemon tree. I felt a twinge in my chest, but it wasn't pain. It was just memory. He looked at me as if begging for a verdict. I don't want your inheritance, Mom. He never wanted to. I just want to. You. And at that time, the world was so quiet that you could hear the birds at the end of the street. I looked at his hand, resting on his knee, trembling now. A hand I had held so many times when he took his first steps, when he was afraid of thunder, when he fell asleep with a fever leaning against my chest. That hand grew, and he left me, but now she returned. Open video, Sarah show, asking for a floor. I took it slowly. One, I didn't and so was tired. I held it as if holding something that is known, but that no longer belongs in the same way. Michael, I said, no, calmly, I never stopped being your mother with you. Not for a second. He closed his eyes, as if that sentence had crossed an entire desert. I continued, but I've learned one thing in this last year. Mother is not the one who can handle everything. He swallowed. Where Jodisiskira Amstobunde. Mother also needs to let go. I saw the tear running down his face. Silent, heavy. He cried like a boy. No, but not me. My tears had been shed back there that night in Highland Park, in that icy guest room, on that road back to Arizona. Well, there, on the gym, Antonested, Dista. Yes, I cried everything I had. Now, what was inside me was no longer pain. It was something akin to peace. Not the peace of perfect reconciliation, but the peace of one who knows exactly where he is, who he is, and how far he can go. Michael put his face to his hands. I made a mistake with you, Mom. I made a lot of mistakes. You were wrong. I replied, whoa, it's honestly, but it's also here now. That's it. It's already something. He raised his face slowly, his eyes red. Will you forgive me? I stared at him for a while. The wrinkles around his eyes, so similar to mine. Wow. The mouth compressed, the fear hidden behind guilt. And I realized that forgiving there now was not a gift for him. It was a way to free what I had left. I shook his hand firmly. I forgive Michael, but I don't go back. He shook his head, crying even more. I know, I know it shouldn't come back. We were left like this, hand in hand, already sober. 2 minutes that seemed as long as a lifetime. The shadow of the lemon tree began to advance slowly across the ground. Oh, when I let go of his hand, it wasn't abrupt, but it wasn't too soft either. It was just right for someone who learned that love is not a prison, it's a choice. He took a deep breath as if he were relearning how to live. Mom, I don't know what will happen from now on. Neither did I. I replied. But each of us will walk the way life allows. He stayed there a little longer. Then he got up. Before he went, he touched my shoulder, a small, hesitant touch, as if fearing to break something. Thank you for having me. I just nodded. The gate closed behind him with a light noise, but it echoed inside me like a chapter turning a page. I stood there, sitting on the porch, fiddling with the orange peels, feeling the strong, sweet smell rise into the air. And it was then that I realized, even when we forgive, some wounds continue to live quietly inside us, not to hurt, but to remember, because life still had one last turn in store for me, one that I could never, nay, ever imagine. And it was she who knocked on my door days later, bringing news that changed everything again. Who do you think it was? I sat on my porch with a cup of hot tea in my hands, feeling the heat go through my fingers and spread across my chest, as if that simple sip was capable of sewing all the threads of my life. The afternoon was silent, but it wasn't the heavy silence of old. It was a full, mature silence. A silence that knows its own value. And it was there, looking up at the orange Tucson sky, that my memory came back, without asking permission, to that night in Texas, the night they called me poor without using any words, just looks. I can see everything still so clear. The room was too bright. The smell of expensive candles, the table set with dishes that had names I couldn't pronounce. And there I was, in my navy blue dress, the same one that the world thought was too small, too simple, too inadequate. I remember Charlene sliding her gaze over me, as if analyzing an object out of place. I remember the wine served only to the others, while they poured plain water into my glass, as if the water said more about who I was than the whole life I carried on my back. I remember the envelope with $300. 3 notes that weighed like a brick in my soul. Luhan. I remember the way she offered them, smiling as if giving a favor. Out. Robert eine walked, and not a humiliation. And it's curious how certain memories burn more when we look at them calmly than when we live on time. Because that night I didn't cry, but then I cried for years. Today, however, when I think about everything, I don't feel pain anymore. I'm sorry. I'll would you without did you aber stertene tata. Clarity. You know, the world has this ugly habit of deciding who you are before you even open your mouth. They looked at me and saw poverty. They never saw the woman. They never saw the nights when I cooked for 200 children at school and came home with the smell of spice on my clothes, but with dignity intact. They never saw the mornings when I woke up early to separate Michael's coffee, cards, even when the money wasn't enough for much. They never saw my effort so that my son would never feel ashamed of where he came from. And, ironically, knew a house. He felt it. They judged me for the small suitcase, for the worn shoe, by the hands that have always worked too hard. But the world forgets. It's just that silence carries stories that don't fit into labels. And today, sitting here on my porch, now, I finally understand. I didn't change to prove anything to them. I changed to remember myself, the woman I always was, even when no one could see. The truth is, I've never been weak. I've just been too good for too long. And too much kindness in the wrong hand becomes a scar. But I remember the feeling I had when I left that Highland Park house for the last time. I walked slowly, but I felt a new strength inside me, as if each step recovered a piece that had been torn off without me noticing. I got into that Uber like an embarrassed mother, one, and I came out of it as a whole woman. Today I look at all this and smile to myself. Not ironically, but because, in the end, the world may try to take you off the table. But it cannot take away from you what you have built inside. And I built a lot. I built love. I built strength. I built silence. And over time, I built my own house, not just the brick one, but this one in here. The hardest, the most precious, and perhaps the most beautiful thing is this. I don't beg for a place at anyone's table anymore, because I finally learned to sit on mine. And if anyone wants to join me, may it come with respect. The wind hit my face lightly as I thought about it all. The still hot cup of tea perfumed the air, and my eyes were becoming moist. But it wasn't sadness. It was just gratitude for having survived myself. Mom, my choices, my pain. And just as I smiled, remembering the path I took, I heard footsteps approaching the gate. Firm steps, familiar, tired. But unexpected. I got up slowly, adjusted the shawl over my shoulders, and stood on the porch, waiting for the approaching shade. And when I saw who came in, my heart beat differently. Norn Awana needed your shoulder, because that visit, it wasn't from someone I expected, and what she brought in her hands, changed the course of history once again. Want to know who it was? Because even I lost my breath when I saw it. When the door finally opened and I saw who was there, Lindsay herself, alone, with a bouquet of simple flowers in her hands. My heart didn't beat with fright or anger. He hit with understanding. Oh, she walked slowly through my yard, looking smaller than the woman who greeted me in Dallas. And when he got closer, he didn't try to smile. He just said, "Wanda, I came to ask for forgiveness, not for the money, not for the inheritance, but for what I chose not to see." Ah, there was no more arrogance in his eyes, just a kind of shame that time had polished. We sat on the porch, where life happens without masks. And there she told me that the wedding had been postponed, that Charlene was now facing the judgments of her own community, and that Michael, for the first time, was trying to figure out who he was away from the expectations of others. I listened to it all in silence. And when Lindsay finished, I put my hand over hers. There was no hatred. There was no hurt. It was just the certainty that each one pays the price of what they choose. She hugged me before leaving, a slow, almost shy hug, and when he crossed the gate, I felt that a whole cycle was closing there, without noise, without shouting, without the need to beat anyone. What? I didn't need that, because, and then, in the end, time has done for me what I didn't need to do. Today, when I sit on my porch with my hot tea, I think of everything I experienced. The dinner with crooked looks, the envelope with $300, the silence that was put in my hand as if it were fate, and I smile, because the truth is that I was never poor. I just didn't scream my worth. They measured me by my dress, by my small suitcase, by my simple manner. But they never imagined the strength that fit in my silence. I didn't win by shouting. I didn't win by humiliating. I won by choosing myself. I learned that dignity is a house that we build from within. It is the only inheritance that no one takes away. And if there is a lesson that I take from this whole story, it is that sometimes love requires us to defend ourselves, not to hurt the other, but to protect the little life that is still left in us. Time has not given me back a perfect son, nor has it given me a new family, but he gave me back to myself. That's it. This is worth more than any financial fund. Thank you for staying with me so far, for having walked through each memory of mine as someone who walks on sacred ground. His presence accompanied me, and I felt it. A like from you is like a hug that warms this corner of my heart and helps this channel to stay alive. And if you want to come back for the next coffee with me, sign up, because every sign up is like opening the door to that balcony again. Tell me also from which city you are watching me. I love to imagine where my voice reaches, in which homes this story has landed. I'll activate the bell. Listen to me. My dear, my dear. So you don't lose it when the coffee's ironed again? And now, don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel of another incredible story.